Hello, everyone. This has been a while to actually get off the ground. It was even scuffed for tonight. We were actually trying to set up for a couple of hours. This is the pilot episode of this. Me and Nemesis are planning to make this talk show something that is all-encompassing, talking about basically everything that's going around in global League of Legends. So LEC, LCK, LPL, LCS, Wildcard, Worlds, MSI, and then other just hot topics that are happening inside of the scene, as well as just trying to talk on a lot of the topics that don't really get a lot of attention on talk shows, or they just don't really have any medium that gets talked about other than maybe some molding YouTubers that talk about things that they have no idea what they're talking about and are in fact germs on the community. But speaking of things, we can talk about we can basically recap with MSI.
Yeah, MSI happened not too long ago, and now we can get like some real feelings about how we felt about the tournament, because now it's been some time. So I guess to start off, there's a lot of like issues with the tournament this year. I feel like some of them, I would say one of them is like the format, one of them is the meta. The meta makes it, the meta is so repetitive. I feel like it churns viewers away. And then maybe one of them is also like the players in a way, because there's only one team from each region, and let's say the teams aren't great, because teams can be RNG sometimes, like whoever wins the split. So if the teams aren't great, then MSI can like feel worse because of it.
Yeah, MSI can definitely be really weird if a certain team ends up going and then they don't perform at all. But like MSI is one of the really weird takeaways from MSI for me is people flaming certain teams that it feels really weird. Like for instance, Damwon in Korea seems to be like the target of a lot of flame because they were the favorites going into the tournament, and then they lost to RNG. But man, RNG looked pretty bad too. So I don't know why Korea gets harpooned. That one was really weird to me. I remember you, me, Fudge, a bunch of other people watching the finals. Now, I know that the general consensus was that the finals was actually more exciting than, we perceived it to be, right?
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of the issue there was mostly because the tournament was very drawn out, was extremely repetitive from pick standpoint, but then also it just seems like as soon as the tournament ends, everyone's just looking to be negative towards like Cloud9 randomly gets like a lot of flack. Yeah. But I had said that I thought that was Cloud9's best international performance, or NA's best international performance ever. Yeah. Not because of results. Like a lot of people, they'll turn their brains off and they'll say that Cloud9 at Worlds once upon a time was a really good showing, or Team Liquid getting to the finals of MSI or something was a really good showing because of, the whole mishap that happened, which I don't even know if the story is ever coming out or anything like that. But that whole thing happened. But the gameplay level now is so much higher, but then on top of that, the gameplay that Cloud9 showed against all the regions in China and Korea was way higher than anything that was shown in NA's wins historically over big teams.
Yeah, I agree. So for me, about like Damwon versus RNG, if I quickly add to that, when I was watching the finals. I watched first game. If I remember correctly, RNG just won. And I just thought to myself, well, that's a 3-0. But then Damwon actually managed to like come back in a lot of these games, and they managed to like make it kind of close actually. Yeah. Even though I thought like their performance was so much weaker than it should be. Yeah. But also like what people don't talk about is that MSI is like the tournament itself is not like easy for competitive players to play. The tournament's very long. You never know what's going on with these teams. Like the teams are there in their hotel rooms practicing all day. Like the environment is sometimes not the best. You never know, like a team, the first week maybe a team is doing well, then the second week there's a lot of conflicts. Maybe the players get like tired of like the environment. Maybe like the food takes in effect. All these things have a factor. Honestly, there can be like many reasons why Damwon, for example, wasn't playing as well. It can be just because the tournament was so long that they like lost it over time. Yeah. I don't think the tournament means much. Even like if someone wins it, I don't like view it as nearly as high as like if you win Worlds.
Yeah, I feel like even if you win it, there's not much that you get I think I know it sounds really weird, right?
Yeah.
There's not much that you get out of it, but if you lose it, there actually is a lot of negativity that comes,
Yeah.
which is really, really, really weird. Like if you do poorly at MSI, you get flamed to oblivion. But if you win it, it's like you just don't get burned alive. That's the one upside there is
you talk about it for like a week or two.
Right. I mean, no one
then,
talks about it anymore. I mean, the fact that we're talking about it right now is just because I feel like it's a necessity to like sort of recap on it and then go into some of the off-season moves that we're going to talk about in just a second, as well as like expectations for summer. And I mean, speaking of off-season moves, I mean, we can just start right with some of them. Abbadage to 100 Thieves is one of them in mid lane.
Yeah.
That one, I talked about it already on stream. I don't know if you have, but like, sure, it probably gives them a better edge at edging out TSM, right? That's probably the biggest thing, right?
Yeah.
Is it a move that you make if you're trying to be successful at Worlds? No.
Yeah. To me, how that move felt, like for me, it's definitely an upgrade. I don't see it like as being worse. I mean,
you had Ryoma.
You had Ryoma. But to me, this move is more like 100 Thieves just trying to secure a world spot, pretty much. Like fighting against TSM, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not gonna like magically fix the team now to be number 1 or 2 contender. They still have a lot of issues in terms of like gameplay and the way they're playing, and they feel very repetitive each year, even when they change the players. So. Great for them, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna matter. I mean, they picked up Reapered. Yeah. Now, this is another thing. I mean, we'll probably talk about it at a later part inside of the podcast as well. People have such high expectations that they think something magical is gonna happen. Nothing's gonna happen. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to be different. And the way that we know this is because just because you win titles doesn't mean really anything, right? There's everyone's using conjecture to evaluate what is happening behind the scenes. One of the big takeaways for me is that the intent behind every single team's gameplay that he was on, every single one, there's nothing. There's no discernible intent. There's no clear thing that you can like point to and be like, okay, something's going different here, right?
This is what
most of it's star-studded lineups. In general, right? And star-studded lineups they're a hell of a drug. I mean, you can do a lot of things with star-studded lineups. You can just win things without really doing anything. I'm not saying that he's doing anything, but I find the community hype or the community consensus around a move like this super gross. I mean, we'll talk about why later when we get to the whole stuff with like coaching and analysis inside of the scene right now and the way that it's currently perceived. But it's like both of these moves. The Reapered thing, I think, is for optics, and what I mean by that is, it's for fan,
It feels like it's just a change to change something. But
of course,
they don't know like why. Like, I would really love if people would just like look at this situation like a year from now on and just see like, okay, this move happened. Did it actually do anything?
Yeah.
And like, I'm very confident to say it won't really have an impact. Like. To the point where it's going to be big enough.
Yeah.
It might be like a small change, but that's how usually it is. So that's pretty much it for 100 Thieves, I think.
Yeah. And then we have Cloud9, Zven moving down to Academy, King moving up to main LCS. And I already talked about this on my stream. There was the Casual clip that went public, or not public, I mean, it went front page Reddit.
Yeah.
It got a lot of views on the like LOL clip channels that are really popular right now. And he basically had the statement that there was no chance he got benched because of gameplay. And I'm completely of that stance as well.
I agree.
So there's no chance he was ever fucking benched for gameplay. So something's going on within the team.
Yeah, obviously information we don't have access to.
Right.
Cloud9, I think historically has made moves that might have like shocked the community, but they usually turned out pretty well.
Yeah.
So that's like one thing to consider. To me, it's definitely weird to ban Zven. I do think he's like one of the.
Oh, he was the best ADC in NA.
Yeah, not just that, but he's also like, for me, he feels like the better part of the team in terms of like players. So that's weird. I don't know personally how King is. Honestly, I'm not really like keeping up with like how good is he is, because how can you when NA Academy is such a joke?
Well,
yeah,
you know,
that.
I mean, it feels bad because NA Academy. I mean, you see that sometimes the teams just lose to teams without any infrastructure or org, right? I mean, literally no org beat Cloud9 Academy, right? In the finals. And I understand the players that are on the team and whatnot, but when you look at the skill level, it's really hard to evaluate what's going on there because a lot of randomness can happen. And I think that a lot of other people don't realize that it's really hard to stand out in Academy when you don't have any teammates to really work with, at least in modern day League of Legends.
Yeah, and probably if you're not doing what the other players are doing, there's usually you're usually gonna have like conflicts with players or coaches.
Yeah.
If you want to play the game differently, if you want to play it in your own way, which can be better. So that also like makes the players be in harder positions. Like maybe they can push themselves harder to make a difference, or maybe they're just shut down by others.
I mean, or they end up compromising their own play and they end up having a worse showing, and then it's actually held against them negatively.
That too.
I mean, this happened to you on Fnatic. I mean, forced to play champions you don't want to, and forced to do things you don't want to in the game, but it's held against you because comms aren't public. So that's another cool thing. And this makes discernibility with what's going on even more hard. And if you don't have stuff or you don't have access to ProView, it makes it harder. But then even if you do have access to ProView, the people that can utilize ProView and know what they're looking for, they don't exist.
Yeah, they don't exist.
I mean, this is scouts, right? Scouts with quotation marks. They don't exist because if they did exist, then it would be obvious that they do exist.
Yeah, I agree. Because how do you say it? A lot of the teams, I would say, have the same people who do the moves like every year, or like the people stay in the scene. They can like jump teams also. So you just like follow the scene a bit over years. You see who the people are who make the decisions, and you just know like, okay, he made a bad decision. What does he do a year after that? Another bad decision. A year after that, another bad decision.
I mean, I remember that I was always really careful with when I was popping up in the scene, right? Initially, right? There was very few times I would champion a player, historically, right?
Yeah.
Like I would talk about Apto, talked about Khan, talked about Alfari before he was big, Whippo before he was big, Crown before he, was actually really, really big.
Yeah.
I was really always very hesitant to champion a player because the second that you start championing a lot of people, it stops meaning stuff, right?
Yes.
Especially if you try to just only promote the ones that are successful, right? And there will be people that will claim that I like champion people that I never did. Like for instance, I brought over Revan to Tempo Storm, right?
Yeah.
I never thought Revan was like world class or world elite or anything like that. I just thought that he was probably more serviceable than the options that we had at the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's sometimes you just have to deal with the hand that you're dealt in certain situations. So championing a player, I think, is a really big step. And what fortunately goes on behind the scenes for a lot of people is you go on like Leaguepedias or whatnot, and you never really know who these people are that are doing these jobs. And what ends up happening as a trend is you only hear about positives, but you don't actually know how many times they missed.
Yes.
So that's like that. I mean, this can circle into like why I've been always so adamant about public content or publicly saying things for public documentation, right? Living in a glass house. Because I found very early on in my career that when you live in a glass house, people can't lie about you. And that was one of my own defense mechanisms. It's also like one of the reasons that I'm always like online, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's, I mean, I've seen that comment chain even come up that like, there have been some times where I've like woken up to like super bad dramas, right?
Yeah.
And it, there were even comments that are like that it looked like it was like in the window where I'm like asleep or something, right? I mean, it gets almost that crazy. I mean, I'm not insinuating that it's intentionally done, but like that's how online I always was, right? As a protection thing. But circling this back to like scouts and analysts, it's like the people doing these jobs, it makes me think, like, if you ask them to sit down and watch a pro player and talk about what's going on inside of the lane, they would always need to wait for the result.
Yeah. These are the type of players that, like, if I feel like if I was in the same room as them, and I would like ask them to go over a replay and explain a laning phase, they wouldn't be able to, or they would tell me things that are completely false. Those type of people, usually I would say the fans don't really like know much about them, because those people, like, they're not
forward facing.
Like, forward facing. There's not a lot of information about them. They just usually sit behind the scenes, let's say. And because me and Alice are, for example, like more in the esports scene, and we have like more context and everything, we also know more about this type of people. But also circling back on the crowning a player that you were talking about.
Someone,
championing a person.
Yeah.
I can give you a good example right now. I mean, you have been very outspoken about Fudge, which you have been memed about literally the entire spring split. Like factor. He's the biggest joke of a player ever, and that he's actually, I think he was called by some people the worst top laner in NA even, or like 9th or something.
At some points, yeah.
Yeah, at some points. And now we look at it, and it's like everyone is just praising him. All of a sudden, Cloud9's best player, which if you watch the game, you can see it very easily.
Yeah.
So there's that. I mean,
my whole thing is, if you just watch his pro view, you could reach this, right? But the other thing is, like, I talked about this on one of my more recent streams, is like when Fudge had errors in laning phase, or like when he would get killed, if you can understand the other variables that's going on, or like the timings that he missed, or like, you know, had he done something slightly better, how winning his position is, then you realize, the intent is so much further ahead than everyone else. And it's not that his mechanics are bad, right? Because you could watch him play Camille.
Anyone can miss execution.
Anyone can mess up execution, right? Yeah. The intent's the most important part, right? But to gauge intent, you have to be able to juggle the variables. But the problem is most people have to wait for the end result before they can ever begin talking. That's where the problem lies. And I often reference like Bloom's taxonomy, right? We'll talk about this later on, right? But anyways, TLDR, when it comes to evaluating academy prospects, or like people promoting up from academy, it's really, really, really hard, because most of the people that are going to be doing that, it's almost like RNG.
Yeah, I feel like they're just flipping a coin. Sometimes it lands, they look like they know what they're doing, and a lot of times it doesn't, and we're just gonna try to forget it and think it never happened. Hide it, basically, in another way.
And well, okay, so moving on from the King from Academy to LCS, I mean, King will, so from everything I've heard, he'll do very well, right? But again, it's just word of mouth. I don't know enough about him, and I only watched a handful of Cloud9 Academy games. I'm trying to think of other roster moves in NA. Deftly's gone, right?
Deftly's gone for
Danny,
yeah. Honestly, no idea what to think. I'm of school of thought that it's probably gonna be an upgrade. I mean,
it's hard not to.
I was not very highly of Deftly, opinion wise. But then again, even if let's say it is an upgrade, I don't know what fixes that at EG. I mean,
I don't know too much what to think about Danny. But I mean, I had a lot of thoughts on Deftly. I mean, Deftly's been around forever. It feels like, right? So I completely agree with you that I doubt that it does anything meaningful. And for North America still to just be chasing after the top 3, it doesn't look like it's anything that's going to shift the balance in the TSM, 100 Thieves, Cloud9, TL war, right? I mean, that's ultimately where the war is.
Yeah, I agree. Should we talk about some other changes?
I mean, the LEC has some big ones.
Yeah.
You have Leader and
Vitality.
Crownshot to Vitality with Crowny.
Yeah, Vitality. So my thoughts are... So the previous roster, it felt like... How I would describe it is, it felt like a skeleton in a graveyard, basically. Just like trying to kind of like, you know, I don't know, like it was like, or like, I guess another way to describe it is like a sinking ship, but it's trying not to drown, basically.
Okay.
Like
the Titanic.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what we said Crowny joined.
Yeah.
And it was true.
I just think this roster, at least, it's gonna be alive in a
Crownie
way.
could have been right here, right
He could
now.
be.
He could have been right here,
He could be,
but he's not.
he chose not to be.
Alright.
Now it's gonna be like a hot bump to me.
Yes.
I personally am not a believer in Vitality roster sticking together like long term. I also think so they're bringing the new player in top lane. I think he's called SRT.
SRT, yeah.
Sorry if
Yep. Or SLT.
something like that.
Oh.
So I think that player is, let's say, I don't know much about him, but let's say he is good. I don't think he's actually in a good position. And the reason why I think that is, I think it's just by default, the players he's surrounded with, I expect him to take a supportive role. And because he's going to take a supportive role, most likely, or he's going to be forced to in a way, maybe, he's not going to probably be able to show everything that he is as a player.
Yeah.
So this might like lower his value or like lower people's opinions on him outright. Now, I don't know anything about him. It might just be that he's bad, and yeah, that's how the story is. That's one thing to like think about. Also think, for example, the mid lane meta, right? Like it's a hot topic to discuss Leader and his champion pool. I think right now is probably one of the best times for Leader to come into LEC. The meta is, I think, very in his favor. A lot of melee champs can be played. A lot of mages have been heavily nerfed. They're
their items are a joke as well.
They're a joke. A lot of their keystones are getting hard gutted.
Mm-hmm.
The new champions, we're probably gonna see Viego. We're probably gonna see Gwen finally.
Yep.
Those are probably champions Leader's gonna play.
Yep. Aurelia,
Yon.
Yep.
He's that type of player, so I think it's a good opportunity. Yeah.
I mean, the thing for me with Vitality that I think is kind of worrisome, right, is so the point that you mentioned about the top laner, but like Crownie, I mean, we both know him really well, right? He wants the game played in a particular way, and he wants like gold and other stuff allocated towards him.
He's
right?
a carry player.
Right, but the two new additions to the team are also identical to that.
They kind of are. Yeah.
There's now this is all like publicly available information, right? That these consensuses exist about these players. So I mean, I think that's really worrisome. I think that what I anticipate is Vitality might start out really strong, but then they might fade out.
I don't think for people that like might be wondering, I don't think like it's a bad thing for every player to like be a carry player. I think it's possible to allocate resources. There's enough resources in League. I just think it's like maybe a harder way of playing in general, which doesn't mean it's like the incorrect way of playing. But yeah, I think Vitality is gonna just look more alive. They're probably gonna, I would say they're easily top 5 probably.
Yeah.
5, 6. Maybe even competing for top 3 essentially. I could see it definitely. But this is not just like this is like multiple changes. I think other teams kind of gotten weaker maybe.
Like who?
I think Fnatic is weaker. Probably.
yeah, you got there. That's fine.
I mean,
I
also think like if you don't count Mad Lions, Rogue, Fnatic and G2, I think the other teams aren't doing anything. Mm-hmm. Like I think Excel's or Ask's Gaming's changes are a joke. Mm-hmm. Chalice is not changing anything. Schalke's changes are way worse.
I mean, I agree with there's a couple of things, right, on all these jungle swaps, right? Yeah. There was the one tweet by, I think it was Dom, right, where he implored Riot to change the meta back to ganking junglers so that not every jungler could just full clear, and that's how simple the role is. Well, I still sort of disagree because I think most junglers in competitive are really fucking bad and they're really fucking dumb when it comes to min-maxing or like super insane pathing, right?
Preach.
And I think that you can really see examples of just when a player really knows what's going on inside of this jungle, like tank v tank or utility v tank or something. When you watch Inspired play, you really get to see what can happen with jungle pathing. Or just creativity inside of the jungle. I don't think the idea that you can't showcase or you can't show up the enemy jungler, I don't think that's actually true. I just think that most people are actually really bad. And I think they were always bad, but now that power farming is the meta, their brain is even more turned off than it was before when they were playing Elise and Lee Sin. And they actually didn't know what was going on, and that's why they were playing those champions. And we'll probably talk about this later, right? Like the amazing tweet that was sent to me on the precipice of the farming jungle meta that just took over everything, right?
Yeah.
People never really knew how to play jungle the last couple of years.
Yeah. So, I think because the way the jungle meta is and the way the players are so bad at their role in jungle usually, I think this just it's not a surprise players can role swap to jungle. I think it should have probably happened before that already, but now it's happening and all of a sudden it's a shock. While in reality it's nothing surprising.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that, I guess. The role right now usually just power farm. Anyone can do that. Like, you know.
Yeah.
In the past, people couldn't even like FK. In the past, junglers just lock camera, cleared some camps, and ganked. Yeah. Now, like, people actually play with some.
I mean, people still manage to mess up power farming.
Oh, they do.
There's so much inefficiency, right? Inside of clearing or the way that they path or how they're pathing and all this other stuff. Like, there's a lot of mistakes that are going on. Now, the other thing is that jungle and support are the two roles that you would actually expect the main laners to go into if they were ever going to role swap.
Yeah, I agree.
Because those are the two simpler roles.
Yeah, I agree.
They're more cerebral focused than, you know, the others. There's less mechanical intensity. I mean, this is sort of expected. So I don't agree with the outcry to that extent. But yeah, I mean, those are the other roster swaps or the jungle changes. I mean, there's a couple of other roster swaps that have happened like around the world, but I mean, these are mostly the big ones.
Yeah, I can agree. Yeah.
I mean, Fnatic, I don't know really what to expect. I know that you and I have already talked about this. I don't think that they're going to perform very well. I think that there's a lot of false hype surrounding them, and I don't know why. I know that Bwipo, I mean, if there's going to be someone that could switch to jungle and maybe have success, it would probably be Bwipo out of everyone that did it. But I don't think that everything else is really going to fall into line for them, and I just can't imagine this is good.
Yeah, I don't know. How I feel is like top lane change, I'm not personally a big fan of. I don't think like Bwipo by any means is like worse than Adam. Like I would rate Bwipo way better than Adam, even like long term. I would rather just skip Bwipo there. But I understand like maybe it's hard to find a jungle change, I suppose, in the middle of the split. So I don't know. I don't feel like they're gonna change much, and if they do, I don't feel like it's enough to like win against the other teams. So there's that, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, this just it cycles back to what's going to happen inside of summer, right? So for LCS, I imagine that it's going to be Cloud9 first, and then after that it'll probably be TL, and then after that, 100 Thieves or TSM. Yeah, I would probably, without knowing really too much more of what's going on, I would probably say 100 Thieves probably is favored.
I actually think so too.
Yeah, I think that they would be favored over TSM, and then it would be TSM. And then everything else is sort of like a toss-up at this point. I mean, that's my top 4 for NA.
I agree. I have the same top 4. For LAC, I think it's hard to predict, like, you know, top 3 maybe. But I would say it's going to be roughly the same. Mad Lions, Rogue, and G2 mainly. And then I think the new like icebreaker could be Vitality and maybe Fnatic if they somehow magically.
You don't believe in astrologists?
Yeah, I think maybe Skarner needs to get buffed like 500 times, and
you don't believe
Corki needs to come into meta really fast, then top lane has to go back. Top lane has to be like Shen, and then.
What about SK?
Well, for SK,
Misfits.
Well, Misfits, I don't know. I think they should just go next season. Same for SK. Same for Excel. I don't think. Yeah, I'm not believing in these teams at all. Not at all. We can quickly talk about maybe Excel change. So they're replacing Tore with Danik. So basically, it's probably an upgrade. Just like looking at the paper, right?
Yeah.
Tora had, I don't even know, promiscuous level of a split.
Yeah.
And then for mid lane, this is like the one that I'm, shocked about. Replacing Chocolate for Nugdak. Now, I don't know what they're trying to achieve with this change. I think Chocolate was either the first or the second best player in their team, easily, for me.
Yeah, I think he was their best.
Yeah, I would put him probably first.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that. I mean...
So this is another removal that has nothing to do with gameplay.
Yeah, nothing to do with gameplay.
It has nothing to do
all.
with gameplay. Yeah.
Then they bring Nugdak, which, I don't know. It's kind of weird. He hasn't played for like one split, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's been on decline for a long time. There's nothing to signify like why would you go for a player like this? Because, you could probably find like other players on the market at this point.
I mean, knee-jerk reaction is that it looks like nepotism. Right? I mean, that's the knee-jerk. I know people hate that word, right? Or they hate when it's brought up in general, but it's like, what else can you really go off of, right? Because everyone just has to use conjecture. I mean, technically, no. I mean, people don't have to use conjecture, right? I mean, players talk. The reality is that most of the roster moves that are happening are known. Like the reasons that are surrounding them.
I mean, they
are known.
Yeah.
They're not going to ever come out, but they're all very known.
They might come out a couple of years later.
Maybe on someone's stream or
maybe
something.
I'm going to say it a couple of years later.
Maybe a couple of years down the line, I mean, so I think that there's a lot of stuff that goes on. I mean, there's a lot of moves I think that have happened. I mean, the Checolad one's a really good example that doesn't make any sense. Another one that doesn't make any sense is Golden Guardians, right?
Oof. Yeah, I was smiling so much. I woke up one morning and I see the change, and it's like they're bringing up a terrible player. Like, I'm sorry, he's a terrible player. He has shown no signs of hope as a player. Jesus. He's been playing the same all this time. It's just a typical, let's try to not lose our job player. And then they replace Niles, which, if you clearly look at the gameplay, he has intent, way better intent than any one of his teammates. Yes, he messed up execution, and yes, he did run it down a couple of games. But honestly,
not a couple. That was
but
he was trying to feed everyone.
But people can't know the story, what is going on actually in the team. They don't know the reasons why maybe he's doing the things that he's doing. It might just be his like mechanism, defense mechanism. Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah.
I mean, it's a dumpster fire.
It just makes me feel really weird, because I feel like, I mean, Niles is so, by the way, that was one of the best like mini documentary things, right?
Oh,
Niles'
the YouTube
Niles'
video.
video was really nice.
Yes.
But the thing that runs through my head, and why I get so passionate and I get so vicious on topics like this, right? Is most of the players in LCS, LCK, LPL, right? Most of them, they find their ways into situations where there are people in titled positions that just have complete power over them, right? And these are like teenagers without any experience. Generally, they don't come from, a lot of knowing of what's going to happen or the ins and outs of the scene and whatnot. And so there's a lot of stuff that just gets taken advantage of, or their life really just gets thrown in a spin, right? Yeah. When you have like the really toxic people on Reddit or Twitter and whatnot that are like, well, that's part of the risk, or that's part of the job, or something like that. But like, it starts to make you, I think, angry, or it starts to make you really sad. I mean, I've been in Korea almost 10 years now, right? And I think back to when I was 17, 18, 19, and it just makes me think about, like, how would I have felt knowing some of the things that I know now that goes on inside of the scene or something like that. And it just makes me feel really bad. So, I don't know.
I can easily relate to a lot of these things, because the same things or very similar things have happened to me years ago, or not too long ago. I could easily be one of these players a couple of years ago that gotten taken advantage of, and in a lot of ways I did get taken a lot of advantage. So
Well, I mean, I know that you already said this, right, on stream, about how you knew you were out before Worlds even ended.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I mean, I'm one of the people that can confirm this because I was on calls with you where you were like, you don't know what you're going to do next split, right? And that's actually how Korea happened.
Yeah.
As one of the things that was going on. Because I was fielding so many different offers from NA, EU, Korea, and even one from China, right? And then I was trying to figure out, what do I want to do? And then I was thinking, okay, well, if you don't end up joining a team, you just come out to Korea, right? But you had to play an entire tournament. You had to go to the tournament knowing that there's no point.
Well, yeah, not just that. I mean,
that's
also,
so insane. I mean, maybe there is a point if you play out of your mind, and then like there's no option
that's the
but
only
to keep.
way.
Like if you pull a fudge at MSI,
I suppose so. Yeah.
right? But that's so insane because you have trial by media,
in
in addition to trial by incompetence.
It is insane, yeah. But not just that. You're also limited in a lot of ways that, for example, people don't know of.
Of course.
You know, like I will. For example, I don't know. I sometimes like do things for other people, even though like they're not the best in my self-interest, and that like backfires. And I am aware of that, and I still do it because I think that's like for the greater good. Because like ultimately, you have an option, like option A or option B, right? Like you do something that is gonna maybe increase your chances of winning, but it's gonna make you lose, look worse, or you do the opposite or something. But either way, you're just losing. It's like a game you can't win, and I understand that. Yeah, it's just at some point I'm gonna lose. I just choose like the terms of which way I'm losing.
Yeah.
And that's the choice I make.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks, and a lot of these things go on behind the scenes, and no one knows about it, right? And then people get judged for it, and then you have people that make narratives and they make stories and then it goes everywhere, and it's just really gross.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's also like, for example, what can hurt a player's image a lot is all these rumor bot accounts. One was sudden one day they just like posted on Twitter and it got spread.
You're referring to Wooloo?
Not just that, there are other accounts that have less followers. They do clearly have connections to the scene, to certain teams,
right?
And then basically like from certain teams they hear like, oh, this guy, this X guy, like there was like some accounts that were posting stories about what happened with me at Worlds.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't, like, how can I even defend myself? Like,
right, you're
even
in
there.
An impossible position.
Yeah,
right?
it's impossible. I mean, best play I have is just to keep quiet and never speak again.
Of course. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And I think that unfair narratives is another thing that, obviously can happen. I mean, one of them was basically surrounding Fudge, right? Even this year. I think that's probably the most recent example that you and I both know about or are aware of that was actually very public, right? Was that Fudge was bad or something.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, it's just people that have no awareness of what's going on or what's happening that are creating that. But then when you think about like an 18 or 19-year-old that's playing the game, I mean, if it's actually accurate or it is really happening, okay, that's a bit of a different story. When it's really egregious and really far-fetched, that's when it starts getting like kind of fucked up, or at least that's how I feel about it. And I'm not saying that you can justifyingly just be super negative or harsh to someone on a personal level, right? I mean, if you want to talk specifically about the gameplay, then that's one thing, right? Most of the people talking about the gameplay can't actually talk about the gameplay. There's where the problem lies, right? So it's trial by media is what I referred to it as earlier. But so yeah, this is what there's a lot of stuff that I think goes on in roster moves. I wasn't expecting to see any before summer because usually they're rare.
Yeah, I probably expected less. I did expect some. I mean, some teams just they know it's doomed, so they just make a change for sake of making a change. But sometimes they completely miss the mark, and that's what happened in some of these teams.
Yeah.
But the big roster moves are obviously always at the end of the year, right?
Yeah. Usually, I mean, of course, right? Offseason, everyone becomes available, and then it's a dominoes game, right? The big player is going to get all the others to fall into place.
Yeah.
That's generally how it's going to end up going. So, I mean, we can cycle this. We can cycle this out. I mean, LCK. What's your top four for LCK?
Yeah. So LCK. I'm probably gonna watch it more this split than like last split, but the thing is, I only usually care about four teams. Yeah, co-streaming. Usually care only about 4 teams, which is T1, Genji, Damwon, and Hanwha Life. I don't like nothing else about other teams really like stands out, impress me so far. I mean, I'll keep an eye, but that's I only care about 4 teams for now.
I mean, so LCK, obviously, I'm pretty emotionally involved in LCK because it's T1. You are too, Genji.
Yeah.
But for T1, like I was legitimately scared in spring because DRX should have been up 2-0 on them. They should have legitimately been up, right? If DRX just had any small brain activity to not go for the inhibitor and just get the Infernal Soul or something, the whole series looks different, right? T1. Even when I was casting last year, it was always really scary. Yeah. It was really, really, really scary because of the way they draft, right? Like that was always the really scary thing. And it was the same thing this year, except there was a lot more turbulence in the gameplay. So Korea getting the 4th slot is like a really big relief in a way, if you're a T1 fan. But it's still kind of worrisome because DRX, I mean, maybe can just magically show up or something. It's not like it's a shoo-in, right? And that's kind of nerve-wracking because, like you already mentioned, you have Damwon, who look the most vulnerable they've ever looked. This is like...
At MSI.
Something is so off about them, yeah. Then you have Generation Gaming, and then after that, you have Chovy Life Esports.
Yeah.
And then below that, you have T1. I think it's basically the top 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I think is like... So Hanwha Life, I think, stands like Hanwha Life. I would like say they're a bit different compared to the other 3 in a way that like it's just a Chovy show pretty much, with occasional support from his teammates. Sometimes his wards, I guess. It's just a Chovy show, and will Chovy be able to like carry against the enemy team or they lose?
Yeah.
For the other 3, they all like in a way I feel like have very similar issues. Which is like drafting and gameplay wise and the way they perceive the game, the meta and everything. LCK in a way, it reminds me like they just pick the same champions. It's like almost like you're in Champ Select and you're just watching the drafts and it's like, oh, they're going to pick Gnar here and they pick Gnar. And oh yeah, they're going to pick this and they pick that. It's nothing is very creative. Players are... Feels like they just copy whoever wins.
Yes.
Essentially, it's like
it's
you
the
look
Tom
at their
Brady's.
runes, right?
Yeah, it's the Tom Brady's.
Like
yeah.
Cookie and 1 guy, Cookie and 10 guys. It's like one of those. So
yeah, I would say that's probably the top 4. I mean, Summer Split's about to resume, right? We'll be doing the LCS co-stream tomorrow night in about 24 hours, I think. Almost 24 hours.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, also LCK teams didn't do any roster changes, right? Like the top 4.
The top...
I think they didn't, as far as my memory serves.
No, I don't think that
that's
kind of
interesting. It's very different compared to LEC or LCS.
Yeah. There's not a lot of changes. And I think a lot of that stems from Korea thinks that like communication and all this other stuff is a lot more important than it is.
Yeah.
Or the idea of it, right? Like what goes into those words or what those words even mean. So I think that Korea generally is way more risk. Like they will not go towards risk.
Yeah,
they're way more risk averse than other regions. I mean, it's pretty much in everything that they do, right? But I mean, we can sort of segue this into the main entree that this episode was mostly going to be talking about, which is basically evaluating players, teams, coaching, analysis, and all this other stuff that's prevalent inside of esports right now, right? Because especially in this offseason, there were a lot of tweets, even some directly at me, by certain individuals who were trying to talk about like coaching or analysis or like all this other stuff. There was the big Renekton thing that happened, right, with Kadril. There was other pretty interesting topics that ended up getting pretty heated, and a lot of them made their way to the community, right? And I thought that we could probably just talk about it because going into summer, it's the same problems, right? Like going into summer, we know that we're going to see Gwen. We know we're going to see Viego. We know we're going to see Kai'Sa. We know we're going to see Nautilus, Leona. We're going to see Renekton. We're going to see all these champions.
Yeah,
right?
most of them.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that we're going to see all of them, right? I mean, the MSI tier list, right? A lot of people attacked you and I because we had several champions that were on don't tier that were very popular at the tournament, right? But if anyone watched the formation of the video, we literally said, while making it, these champions will be picked.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with where we think they're placed in terms of like their actual worth, right?
Yeah. The cherry on the cake, I feel like, is the Reddit threads that came up.
The
which
stats.
The
stats
win rates
one.
of our tier list. Like, hello, what are we looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah, because a champion has
I
higher
remember I remember there was a couple of people, right, that tweeted. There was even a notable person that tweeted, right, that Gala kept picking Kai'Sa, right? And so Kai'Sa's win rate was really high. Or, well, Kai'Sa had a nice win rate at MSI after all because Gala kept picking Kai'Sa. And my response to that is, okay, so RNG's winning games, right?
Yeah.
So, but I don't think the person realizes that what I'm saying to him is Gala could have picked anything and achieved a really similar result, right? By just listening to me a stat or like telling me that someone picked a certain champion, you're not doing anything. I'm not
saying anything.
You're not saying absolutely anything about what's going on, nor does it even necessarily mean that the champion's really good, right? And this is a pretty nitty-gritty topic to begin getting into, right? When it comes to champions or coaching and analysis in general, right? Because the way that most analysis is done in the scene is literally up until the result.
Yeah, it's results-based analysis, and
everything is.
Yeah, they like throw you in a paper how much win rate a champion has. Same goes for solo queue. Same goes for competitive.
Yeah, they'll do that.
And then they're like, yeah, I mean, or like presence percentage, which doesn't mean anything. Okay, Renekton has, let's say, 90% of presence. What does that mean? Reminds me of like people just don't question anything. They just like maybe believe outright. Like, for example, if I go to a person who talks very well, he will just like, okay, I'll give an example of what happened. So I was in an Offseason and I was talking to, I'm not going to say who. I was talking to a person who was like trying to convince me to join a team. Basically what they tried to do is they would talk and just fill me with information. But then, I'm just like following, is talking for like 10 minutes. Okay, so ask him a simple question, right? Which was like, how do they know like that these players are good? Or like, how do they know these things? And basically the answer I got was like nothing. It was a dodged answer. It was just
a non-answer.
More information. That's not really relevant. And at some point I'm just like, okay, this person doesn't know how to answer my question. So he has obviously no idea what he's talking about. And the same goes for like these champions. I feel like that people never ask themselves questions like, what does 80% presence mean? What does this percent win rate mean?
Mm-hmm.
Why do they win? On which teams do they win? What's the context in their wins? Was it just a stomp? Did the champion actually have any impact in the game? You have to actually go and dive deep into the games that the champion is present at.
So I think in general where a lot of these issues stem from is the ability to see the alternative, right? What else could have happened in the freeze frame?
Yeah.
Or what else could have happened before the end result? And then determining if the end result is actually the most probable one. If you play out that situation, dozens and dozens of times, right? And there are situations in League which are readily agreed upon, right? You can store the same freeze frame to 100 different pros; they'll all say the same thing.
Yeah,
like this is
super
what should
simplistic,
right? Super simple ones, right? And then there are more nuanced ones where a majority of pros will agree, but maybe some won't, right? And some won't, maybe for a different reason. And one of the most interesting ones that also got me in a lot of shit, right, was the iconic, this is from Swing Split, the Cloud9 TSM draft. Do you remember this one?
Yeah.
Now the interesting thing was the opinion of others was weaponized as a means to like attack me and make Reddit threads. and tweet at me, right? Because the stance was that these pros broke it, okay, so I'll say this in a few different ways. These pros said this, so LS is wrong, right? But they conveniently leave out you and Mickey X, who are the two best actual players in the whole conversation, and then Mickey being actually the most accomplished out of anyone that talked, right? Clearly thinking that if the players are good enough, this comp is better, right? Which is an interesting conversation in itself, because I agree with that, right? If two teams are not actually good enough, yeah, champions like Gwen or like Renekton and all this other stuff, it actually becomes really good. Yeah. Because everyone sucks, right? But the really weird thing there was the idea that simply because someone went over something or said words, that it meant that it validated their stance. That's really weird, because one of the things that I always talk about is discernibility, right? This is one of my favorite words and one of my favorite topics lately. And the analogy that I always try to use is like, imagine you have a very, very low understanding of like physics, and then two physicists are presented in front of you and they talk about something on a higher level, right? You have no ability to discern who's actually right or wrong. You'll just gravitate towards whoever you seem to like more, or whoever's more convincing.
Whoever has like better voice in a way.
Whoever's more convincing, right? Yeah. And that's a scary and dangerous thing. Which is why I feel like when you get into these trials by media or trials by public, it becomes really scary, when really it should be trial by peers. Almost, in a way, it should be trial by peers. So stuff like that starts to get really scary, especially when you consider, I referenced this earlier, right? Bloom's taxonomy. Remember, understand, apply, evaluate. I'm forgetting the order of it. And then it creates the last one, right? But basically, they're stuck in between applying and apply, analyze, evaluate, create, right? They're stuck between applying and analyzing. They're just stuck there. They analyze it up until the end point, the end result, and then they just apply. And then they analyze the end result and then reapply, right? There's nothing that's going on. There's no creation, right? There's no original thought. So one of the things that I don't think I've ever like verbally said, right, is people should think about how many original thoughts actually exist in the scene without needing an end result. It's basically none.
Yeah, we had this conversation today. Basically, how many like original thoughts exist in the game that like they warp the game in a way, right?
Yeah, they warp it.
And the examples you come up with, like I was thinking, right? They're very like there's almost none of them. Probably the most famous one would maybe be like Faker, that he like warped the view of how mid lane should be played.
Well, so I made a video once upon a time. It was called Man versus Machine, right? And because in StarCraft there was eras. Yeah. So for no one that played StarCraft, I mean, you never played StarCraft. There were these eras where certain players dominated everyone, right? And that was just the way to play.
Yeah.
But this is why I find analysis so interesting inside of the scene, and why I'm so willing to put things out there. But if someone wants to refute it or tell me that I'm wrong, then it's gonna have to be a nitty-gritty like war, right? There's gonna have to be a really thorough explanation on why something's wrong. Patchless games are the most fascinating to me. StarCraft is one of them. Super Smash Bros. Melee is another one. Patchless games. And two players that I often reference is Flash, and I reference Zane in Smash Melee. These are two players that the game was stuck in a standstill, and the way to play was totally different from what they eventually ended up showing, right? Bisu was a Protoss player that also showed that the way to play was actually wrong. Now, the thing is that if you come along and say that the way to play is actually the way that Flash or Bisu would eventually come to do it, or Zane would eventually come to do it, no one would have the conversation with you.
Yeah, they would all think you're crazy.
Right, you're crazy, right? Yeah, you're like Galileo, right? And you get outcast. But this is where the craziness comes in, right? Because if you're willing to demonstrate it, right? Or you're willing to show examples or showcase freeze frames or like other things where it ought to be possible and it can be possible. Why is that not a generalized thing? It's so alien.
Okay, I might be wrong, but the way I like understand this is like that there's like a part of our human brain which like doesn't want to accept like wrongness. Like we don't want to like
bubble popping.
Yeah.
People don't want the bubbles popped.
Yeah, so that's why basically so many things like this people just don't want to accept, or like
of course
they like say like they're open-minded or they listen to you, but they aren't really doing
most people are agreeable. This is just a thing in life, right? Most humans are agreeable. Most people that went through elementary school, middle school, high school, college, whatever, right? Well, maybe not college at that point, but how many of them questioned the material that their teachers are giving?
Almost none.
Almost no one does. And when you do, you're often reprimanded.
Yeah,
you're actually
the crazy
almost,
one.
Right,
Yeah,
you're crazy for questioning the material almost in a way. And I find that to be really strange because when it comes to games, way down the line, if you question things, it's almost like you're like an outcast.
You are,
for questioning, right? I mean, I dealt with this, right? I mean, this is literally my career.
This is your life.
It's my entire career is questioning the status quo, and then trying to show either why it is solid or why it's not solid, right? Like that's everything that I've tried to do. But in order to do that, you have to be willing to demonstrate or actually grapple with the substance material. Which most people can't do that.
Almost none of the coaches can, because they're not good at the game.
Well, this goes into the idea: do you have to be good at the game to be able to coach?
And which we both believe that we do. That you
do. Yes.
Yeah.
You have to be able to play.
Yeah.
Because the game is simple.
Can anyone in the world believe that a silver player can like be smarter about the game than a challenger player?
So this is the weirdest thing is. So interestingly enough, I had this talk on my stream when I was an up and coming creator, whatever you want to call it, right? Influencer in the scene. When I was way smaller. I used to have I mean, I'm sure there's clips or videos of it where I would say that you don't need to be high MMR to know a lot about the game, right? A lot of that is set out of just fear, because when you're such a small individual or all this other stuff. No one really shares this belief, and you're really stepping on toes of
you're
people.
Crossing a line,
you're crossing a line.
Your career might just be like that instantly.
Right, or almost instant, right?
Yeah.
But it's always a really weird thing. Now, I don't think that you need to be pro level. You don't need to be top pro level or something like that. You need to be able to tango with pros, right? You should be able to demonstrate what it is that you're talking about because it's not that hard.
Yeah.
Or you can go in. I can go into a custom against you and manipulate a minion wave to a certain point, right? Like there's limitations to your ability to exert dominance over me in the laning phase that wouldn't happen unless enough games are played or enough situations occur inside of the game, right? Like the failure to dance. Mm-hmm. And this is a pretty standard thing. That's like a pretty common threshold that I think that we even see it in other like cerebral games. I call them cerebral games because I don't know what the term is, right? When I'm talking about like chess or just like board games, right? Over the top cerebral activity, board games or games or something, right? Normally the people will be really similar in skill level. So it was always something that I never really thought was practical. Mm-hmm. And I always thought it was really strange. So an interesting example of this is like you pull up a VOD of like a silver player, right? And you ask them to point out their own mistakes. They can't without the end result happening first.
Yeah,
they could just say, "Oh, I shouldn't do that."
Yeah.
"Oh, I shouldn't have done this." "Oh, I'm doing this bad." Okay. If you pull up a bad Herald fight or a bad Dragon fight, you pull up these bad things, right? You watch enough footage on YouTube or film, whatever you want to call it, right? You can recognize basic patterns, and then you could copy and paste similar speeches to recognizable patterns in your own VODs or replays that your team might be playing. Doesn't mean that you have any wherewithal. What's going on.
Yeah. The interesting part of like how to test someone also is to lie to them.
Yes.
You go to like I would go to a silver player and I would tell them this champion does this because of that. And what I would say is completely wrong, but the odds of them believing me are very high.
Of course.
Probably like almost 100%.
That was one of the last things I started. So back when I was still public coaching, that was one of the last adaptations that I started integrating into coaching, right? Would be to lie to the client.
Yeah.
Can you tell that I'm lying? One of the other things that I started integrating were circles, right? I would draw lots of circles all on the screen, and I'd say where are the best spots to stand and why.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have to know why the spot's good to even point it out sort of in the first place.
If you draw a lot of them, obviously they can just
it'll
flip.
confuse the person.
Yeah, they can just flip one, but the odds of them hitting the right one are very low also.
And really subtle ones, I mean, sometimes you can get really subtle spots that are really nice, right?
Yeah.
And doing this over and over and over, ultimately what it's doing is it's making you aware of the alternatives, right? What alternatives exist. That way, when you see an end result, you can evaluate, was this a probable outcome or who blundered and why, right? And I think this goes really hand in hand with evaluating. Intent, I guess, would be the word, right? For this topic. And that's a scary thing too. And this is sort of like a frightening thing. And I think that a lot of people want to believe that because they watch a lot of the game, or they watch competitive a lot, or they watch lots of replays and all this other stuff, that they really know what's going on. And then, like, I remember, I think I had Nemo in my chat, right? The chess girl grandmaster, women's grandmaster, I think is the title name, in my chat when this topic was brought up a couple of weeks ago. And I'm like, people go on YouTube and they watch chess all the time, right? They watch so many videos. They watch Hikaru stream. They watch, I think Anna is her name, Anna Chess.
Yeah.
They watch Gotham, and they watch all these videos, and they might get better.
Yeah.
Right.
Basics.
You're not playing at a grandmaster level. You're not playing.
Close.
You're not playing at an international master level.
It's the same on League. You're not playing on challenger level or like master.
Right.
High diamonds.
And there's a difference between being able to point out a move and then being able to explain the web of why the move is right.
Yeah.
And if you can explain the web, you're talking about something that is way deeper than just the move itself.
And maybe not only about your own role, also about like others.
Sure.
Which there's a lot of factors.
So it goes really deep.
Yeah, it goes really deep.
The other scary thing about coaching, right, is so there's a couple of questions, right? And I really like, there's a certain saying, right? Generally, everyone is within 4 questions from not knowing anything in esports, right? And what I mean by that is you can sort of ask a couple of questions to get someone to go down the rabbit hole to make them realize what is actually going on, right? How does an owner or a general manager know that their coach is providing value to players?
They don't.
I mean, that's the reality,
because
right? They can't do it. It's not possible. It is impossible for the owner or the general manager to actually know. They can hear, they can listen, right? They can sit in on a scrim block. They can sit in on a team talk, a team dinner, a team meeting. They can hear words going in and out their ears and stuff. They can't tell accuracy.
Yeah.
There's
don't know
no
what the
discernibility.
Words mean.
Right. Okay.
So
how do these people hire people to execute litmus tests on these people?
They don't. So
okay,
that's where like the problems,
we're going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's where the problems start, right?
This is where it starts.
Also,
because
like,
Riot made this title.
Yeah, they made the title coach, which is an enforced title. So every team has to have them.
Every team mandatorily has to have a coach.
Yeah. But
every single one.
Yeah.
Where did they come from? I mean, I used to talk about this back in the day, right? This used to be one of my hot topics, right? Where did they come from? What are the credentials to be a coach? What do you need? Is there something to gatekeep you?
Certificate. Yeah. Okay. Not that one.
Okay. All right. No, let's cut there. I think. Like, what is going on?
No.
There's actually nothing.
I mean, so from my experience, the way they look at it is like, okay, this guy has 3 titles. He must be a good coach. And for the topic that you were saying about, like, if they're in the same room and they can hear words, from my experience, the way they do it is they compare it to like basketball and football, and like they just think like, wow, this coach should have authority and he should feel like a coach. And if someone gives you the vibe that they're a coach just because of the way they stand or speak, and then they hire him because of it, then I mean it's doomed already. Usually.
So the interesting thing is, I think that there is probably a way to tell, right? Based
on
this is probably for like another
behavior.
episode, right?
Yeah.
I've talked about this, right? I've talked about it on my personal stream. I want to have Reynad come on and talk to you and I about this topic in general, right? Recognizing people who can sort of discern, even if they lack context almost.
Yeah, but that's a skill.
That's a skill in itself. Yeah.
And it's hard to learn.
That's really hard, right? One of the things that I think that you can do is you can try to observe. You can try. So one of the things I've always done, right, is I've tried to measure objective orbits that surround a certain individual, right? So let's say that there's Timmy, right, and I don't know anything about Timmy, right? But I see that there are 100 different people who don't know each other, don't talk to each other, don't interact with each other. They all go to Timmy. Okay. Well, all of these people who voluntarily on their own accord go to Timmy, and all of them with no relationship to one another, all say similar things about Timmy, something's going on with Timmy.
Yeah, something
is going on. Yeah. Something is happening with Timmy. And the way that I say that this is important is, as long as those people have no responsibility to say positive things about Timmy, which is very different. If you're in an academy team, okay, can you ever say something negative about your own staff?
No, because this will just hurt your chances of promoting.
Yes.
You always have to keep your image like in a light way, like in a good way, a good light, I guess.
Yeah.
Because that's your only hope, right? Your dream is to get promoted and become better. And it doesn't matter if you're good enough. Like you often can be good enough to just play for the main roster, but you need to have a good image. Even if the people you're dealing with have no fucking idea about the game.
Right.
Or
so
anything they're saying.
But
those people are the people that have the power.
Okay, so now we cycle back, right? Because there's a lot of trial by media where people will cite that certain people are good because they've spent a lot of time
with
in
them.
Development leagues or just in leagues in general, right?
Yeah.
But what option do players have? We don't get Dunzo manifestos anymore. Right? None of this stuff ever comes out. Nothing ever comes out because legalities, almost in a way, right?
Yeah.
Certain players have NDAs. Certain, teams maybe do stuff with who knows what actually goes on.
Who knows what they sign?
Who knows what they sign?
I can talk about this. The first contract I ever signed, which was for Mad Lions, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. Like honestly, so I like no one knows this, for example, but I even contacted some people for help back then because I was a nobody. All I had was my Slovenian friends on my Discord. Some of them were like, hi, Ila. Like, for example, Mickey X. He was the one helping me with the most of the stuff.
Okay.
So I had no idea what I was signing. And then a lot of the things that were written in the contract, like, they were, like, they felt so scary for me. I had to, because they wanted me to sign, like, as soon as possible. I had to, change a couple of things in the contract because I wasn't, like, happy. And I was just lucky that I had someone like Mickey X who was helping me because he did it out of, like, pure kindness, I suppose, right? Because we were friends. But let's say a player in the same position doesn't have someone like that. You're just doomed.
Yeah, you're doomed.
You're signing something, no idea what it is. Your parents can't really help you most of the time either. I mean, they can maybe help you with some basic stuff. And then, unlucky, you signed a 3-year contract and you're jailed and your conditions are super bad.
Yeah, so I think like lawyers and stuff like that, I think that they are definitely really important, right? Because esports, especially to this level, right, with franchise leagues and these teams with exorbitant amounts of money and stuff, right? It's all very new, right? And so while we're talking about like owners and GMs not really being able to do these certain things, it's not their fault. I'm not blaming them, right? It's not their fault.
Yeah.
Right? Like imagine you're the brand new owner of something and you're doing a startup, right? And you come somewhere and all these people are proclaimed experts, right? That have these titles and stuff. If you don't know any better, or you haven't been around the scene for long enough, yeah, of course you just believe the titles. But titles don't mean anything when there's nothing to gatekeep the titles. Anyone could be a coach. Look, if I join a team again, you can be a coach. Okay? You can, like, I mean, you know what? I like you. Okay? You can be a coach. Like,
I mean, it's true, right?
It's actually that simple.
Yeah.
It is that simple.
Let's say, I mean, I can give an example. Let's say you're a diamond player. You join a team, let's say master tier team. Yeah. I don't know, clash team for all I care. All of a sudden, you're a coach. You got a position coach. You put it in your Twitter bio. You go message some people. They click on you, coach.
So I mean, speaking of, like, okay, there's no credentials. There's nothing to gatekeep it. There's no qualifications, right? And it's not to say that I don't think that people like this I think the idea of a coach is absolutely necessary. It is.
I agree. I mean,
I think it's necessary.
Yeah, the way humans learn.
And also, I think that the topic of, like, strategic coach is kind of weird in itself, right? Because I think what most former players turned strategic coaches end up doing is they end up acting as if the team just had another player in review, right? There's nothing organic there. There's nothing new. There's nothing original that's coming out. And I think that that's scary.
This is where usually the word experience comes in, which is...
What does experience tell you about a person, how a person's competence?
Nothing.
Yeah. That's all it tells you, is that they've done something for a long time.
Yeah.
That's it. It doesn't tell you how good they've done something.
I mean, you have players that, let's say played season 1 at Worlds, but you look at them now and they can't,
So, okay.
They can't even reach master.
This was a tweet that I engaged. I think you engaged in it, right? Or maybe not. It was the tweet where Amazing had cited that certain players had been to Worlds, and so there should be value there, right?
Yeah.
And then my whole main gripe with it, and I entered into an argument with several people in the comments, right, is based on what?
So basically, the tweet is in a way defending players like me, right?
Sure.
But I'm going and I'm kind of like not like I'm flaming myself in a way.
Yeah, of course,
because I don't think like the things that he's talking about are true, and I shouldn't be defended for those things that he's saying.
Right.
I don't want to be, because I don't think they're true. So yeah, just because I was at Worlds, it doesn't mean that now all of a sudden...
What's comical to me is that you didn't partake in almost anything that he's saying should have probably been happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So, okay, the whole take is really gross. I'm using the word gross to hyperbolize it. It's all conjecture, right? Which is most things in esports. It's conjecture. It hypothesizes that simply because these people made it to somewhere, that they ought to possess a skill set on the basis that they made it there.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't tell you anything, right? Because we've seen bombshells behind the scenes with how bad team atmospheres are and how dysfunctional it is and all this other stuff, right? But the reality is that if that person was actually capable of remembering and understanding what happened, then he would be able to apply it. If he could apply it, he would analyze it. If he could analyze it, he would be able to evaluate it. If he could evaluate it, he would create, right? The latter, right? But you would see that in his gameplay.
Yeah.
Regardless of execution.
I agree.
So we know it's not there if you just watch the gameplay.
Yeah.
So where's all this other conjecture coming from, and why? This is a really big red flag, by the way, is if people think that you can just hire these players or these people, I mean, you were in the list, and allocate them these duties, you have no idea if they can actually do it. That is the most reckless thing you can possibly do.
And you're flipping a coin.
It's not even a coin. Why would a teenager with no life experiences, and if you're going to say that living in a team house with titled position people who don't, arbitrary qualifications and all this other stuff, and being forced to interact with other people and then becoming young adults, etc., equates to life experience. I mean, that's something else.
Yeah.
Because would you ever let that person micromanage or oversee other adolescents or up-and-coming players? I mean, you have no idea without actually seeing them in person.
I agree.
So why is this even a thing?
I can't explain it. I don't know.
I can't explain it either.
I don't know.
But when I see that, I get afraid, right? Because I get afraid because that is so, like, that should be red flags on all cylinders. Like, that should be firing like fireworks. That's a red flag. And yet it seemed like there were people that thought it was like normal. And I'm like, literally every point you're listing is conjecture. Can you confirm or validate anything that you're actually saying? No. Why does no one see this as like a red flag? I don't know. I was losing my mind.
I don't know. That's how esports is.
Oh my God, man. But things don't change until stuff like this starts changing in general. When it comes to like infrastructures or thought processes and all this other stuff, what do people think coaching even is? Because I've had quite a handful of people tweet at me lately, and they either invent my idea of what coaching is, or they try to tell me what coaching is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
A good example for me would be watching maybe some of these YouTube coaching creators, however you might want to call them, right? Usually they're like for lower elo people. And I go watch some of their videos, right, out of curiosity. I'm watching like 5 minutes. I'm just like, is this what coaching is nowadays? Like, I feel like it's more of cheerleading than coaching.
Or like encouragement.
Yeah, encouragement, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, you know, just maybe like I'm not saying they're saying everything is like bad. They're just saying very, 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 very basic stuff at maximum. And they're like missing so many things that are happening on the screen. You know, it's really sad. And those people are paying like ridiculous amounts of money. I mean, let's say you're paying $100 for a coaching session that it's not going to magically make you better. Like, it's really not.
No, right. And I mean, this is one of the reasons I stopped coaching.
Yeah.
Right, publicly. Is I started feeling bad for the amount I was charging, and I didn't need to anymore. I like when I had like I coached for content, I needed money. I didn't have any other options, right?
Yeah.
And then supply and demand, so I keep upping my price. I don't think that the price should be what it is, but supply and demand was sort of like what I was going with, and I didn't have any other options. But one of the shining examples should have actually been Zen coaching, the thing that you and I did. Okay, so for those unaware, Nemesis and I were asked to evaluate a coach who has been publicly coaching for about 5 years, and he's coached every MMR from Bronze Iron all the way up to Challenger, and he's even coached amateur players like X or semi-pro level, whatever, right? This guy has to probably have the most experience under his belt while also like reviewing VODs on stream of like Korean pro players, Chinese pro players, and like doing like VOD analysis and all this other stuff, right? Publicly out there. It was on his stream. He's been doing it for years and years and years and years. Me and you go over his VOD. He can't help a pro player. He can't even help an amateur, right? There's too many things he doesn't see and he doesn't entertain. And then the like the flow charts that you would probably have to ask for like questions to actually like analyze and evaluate and then create like, okay, what are we going to do here? And then also in do so in a way that he could get the client or the person that he's trying to help to understand it, right? Because sometimes you have to try lots of different approaches, which is I'm a really big fan of like analogies when trying to get someone to get a memory to stick. That coaching session should have been really like eye-opening, right? Because here's a guy with insane amounts of experience, with so many different people, so many different things just out there. And we're to believe that there's people who watch games that somehow should have actually more. He has more hands-on experience than almost anyone, right? Mm-hmm. So if that guy was that incapable, I guess, for pro players or like amateurs.
And how bad are the others?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, that's the question. Like maybe also like unironically him putting out so much content. If this person was
My phone is blowing up.
Yeah, if this person was trying to maybe like join a team as a coach, it might also actually lower his chances just because he's like pumping so much content online. That's also one thing. And also like another thing is like Zen coaching is not necessarily bad for like iron, bronze, silver type of players.
Gold,
There's probably a lot of things he can actually teach.
He gets
those
you
players.
to start thinking about the super basics.
Yeah, super basics. I mean, that's not bad for players of that type. But the higher you go, the worse it gets, basically.
Yeah.
And this applies to just all these coaches, content creators. There's almost nobody that does public coaching that's actually good.
I mean, the last one in public that I can remember was Vigar.
Yeah, Vigar V2 is like the only one that comes to my head.
So way before Vigar even joined Fnatic, and this is before you and I were like talking a lot or whatever. Me and Max, we had the community Discord server, right? Because I got fed up with websites like, Gamer Sensei and League Coaching and all these other websites, right? With just no vetting process, nothing, right? And me and Max probably went over, and sometimes we would have Discord calls with the person, and we'd go over VODs, the same way that you and I went over Zen Coaching and whatnot. And out of 100 plus people, which saying 100 plus doesn't actually mean anything, by the way, for people listening. It's just actually the number that it was. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean that we're like doing insane due diligence or anything like that. There was only Vigar that actually was talking about nitty gritty things and application processes to understand them, and like the web that goes on, like the thought process and whatnot. And that it stands out like a black sheep. Yeah. Like as soon as the person starts talking, you can tell they're like warm or hot, and then they keep going, and then you get there.
I can tell the story about this. I found his stream when he had 5 viewers, by the way. He had 5 to 10 viewers. I remember it vividly.
Yeah.
I was there. He never knew that I was there. I was there. I never showed. I never typed anything. I was just watching day and day and day. Then I went into his VODs, watched VODs. Then I went to start talking with him. I immediately spotted this guy knows what he's talking about. He's not just, the ultra basic wave aggression this, aggression that, river control, blah, 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 And then I went ahead, and I was the one who suggested him to Fnatic. And it didn't take him long to convince them that he knows what he's talking about. That's why also I feel like he was such a valuable asset when he was working with me a lot, and he was helping me a lot. Like I think it's like a big reason of me like improving my everything, the way I play the game, like up to laning to anything to develop the game. His champion suggestions, everything we talked about, like I had a nice time working with him.
So the scary thing is like you can go through that process, right? And you can recommend him to Fnatic, but then that process comes up again, right? How does an owner or a GM tell?
He just has to be convincing.
You got to be convincing. That's it. You just have to talk well.
Yeah, you have to talk well, and that's what he did, right? Which is nice. I knew that's how the process goes, so I was just hoping he talks well.
You know what though? It's nerve-wracking. And I know what that process is, because when I was trying to get Max into teams, right? It's nerve-wracking where him and I could have conversations, and then I would just be there, and I'm like, you have to just not mess up the talk. Mm-hmm. Like it doesn't matter what you know about the game. None of it matters. You just have to convince the person that you're going to have the Discord call with, and he would get stressed out about it, and he wouldn't understand it. Right? Like why does it have to be this way? I got
a good example of this. So one of the teams that I joined, I was trying out for them, and basically basically a person that recommended me to get in, basically just told me like, just look good, basically, which he told me like just talk a lot, right? Doesn't mean I have to talk good things, just talk a lot. Be vocal, because that's what people like, when they don't want like a shy person or something. They just want the guy that talks a lot in game. High communication doesn't mean I'm saying anything useful, just high communication. And just play your normal self, be yourself, and you're probably gonna get a spot. Well, that's what I did. I just went there, talked a lot, was my normal self, got a spot.
And I mean, it's a sad thing.
It's just you have to look good.
It's a really yes.
You are good.
It's a very sad thing. So like, I mean, I think on the so interestingly enough, on the topic of Max, like I can talk about Max for a while, or I mean, I could talk about him for a while. I won't. So Max is the current Cloud9 coach, right? Fudge talks about him. He's always on the stream with Fudge and all this other stuff, right? And Max so he spent an extremely long time in Korea living with me.
Yeah.
He would sit literally side by side, same way you and I are right now, when teams would contact me or pro players on teams for like personalized coaching. And he would just sit in and he would listen and just watch, right? When Max got to Korea, he was a challenger NA player, 700, 800 LP. Got to Korea, was D4, D3, right? Max played thousands of games on Korea. I forced him to play other roles. And then in addition to forcing him to play other roles, I forced him to play other games. Made him play StarCraft 1, made him play Magic. He also played TFT for a stint. And then he wouldn't just play the games. I would force him to have conversations on the games for like game theory, right? Like why are certain things happening the way that they are, right? Because you have to get the gears going, right? Why are things working the way that they are? What are the patterns that are present? What are the things that you're recognizing? How can we break this down to evaluate it and then recreate it or make something new, right? And this was all a really big process. And then he was on BBQ and whatnot. Max is still a horrible fucking coach when it comes to grappling with strong personalities, which is a skill set that you have to. That's a skill set you have to really learn over time, because Max will just get overpowered by someone's demeanor. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's his own, like it's one of his big weaknesses, right? And I've always said that to him, that he'd probably be fine if he could talk with an open-minded individual who could actually tango with the game, just talk solely about the game. He'll be fine, right? I think he's more than serviceable enough in that department. If it comes time to tango with someone that's going to be resistant, or he has to figure out ways to get through in different ways, he's going to suck. And I still hold that stance. And I think that that's somewhere like he could probably get a lot better at. And everyone can always improve. Everyone can always grow, right? But what he went through before I would even vouch for him to join a team was rigorous in terms of actual like on-field experience across a multitude of things, right? No one's doing that. Most people's idea of becoming a coach is they like the idea of it, right? Or they watch YouTube videos, they watch VODs, they write data down in a notepad or something like that. There's nothing rigorous about any of it. It's so fucking insane. And then they just get the title, and it's and then if you do well, if the team does well, and that goes on your resume, oh shit,
that guy must
you're
be
getting a promotion.
Yeah. That guy must be a good coach.
Oh
he won so many titles. I mean,
the other thing I hate is what is it called? References, right?
Oh,
references in esports almost mean nothing. They almost mean
always
nothing.
Friendship.
It's always friends.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, because of the thing we talked about earlier, how the fuck can you say anything bad?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't.
Yeah.
If I'm an employer, okay, and there's this new guy coming to me, and his references are his past team, and I call the past team, and the past team says, yeah, actually, that guy's not that good. Then he's going to go, you know what, actually, that guy's not that good. And then it's just going to become a shit-flinging contest. And we can't have that.
Yeah.
So references are dead. They're a useless thing.
Mm-hmm. Kind of funny, yeah. So a couple of years ago, I had like pretty much confirmed information that like the way some of the teams are being made in like especially like regional leagues are basically coaches just ask other coaches how the players are.
Yes.
And that's how they decide on which players to take. Yeah. They don't know anything about what player is good and what player is not.
But it's not their fault.
I mean, it's not their fault. I agree. But
they're in a damned position.
So basically, you just need to keep a good light all the time. Let's say someone is insane in the game, but he has a bad reputation. Well, he's doomed because no one's gonna pick him up because of
I think it's also scary that like conversations even sort of like this one. What? I don't know what Tov's doing. Tov's that's getting edited out. You better remember the timestamp, Tov. What was he doing? He was like waving at a girl or something. I don't know. No, but so basically, I think it's kind of weird that it's taboo even to have a conversation about. It shouldn't be taboo just because it's unsettling, or just because it ruffles feathers or something like that. It shouldn't. It should actually just start making people think. I mean, you're 1 to 4 questions away from realizing, wait a minute, I guess there's nothing there, right? Okay, so again, I mean, we can just go down the questions again. How does someone know that someone is a good coach or analyst? Well, players? Okay. Can a player actually say what they honestly think about those people without risking job security? No.
Very often not.
So now we have determined that the metric that we use as the public to determine whether or not this person is credible is actually faulty. Okay, so now how do we actually know? Well, bingo, we don't. So I find it really, really, really gross when I see threads like this all pop up, right? And it circles back. It circles back to the way that analysis is done inside of the scene. People will cite a champion win rate. They'll cite a champion's popularity. They'll cite, how many teams are picking it or the winning team is picking it. Because the winning team is picking it doesn't mean that it's good. Winning team could probably just pick anything and win, right? In most cases. So then when stats start to get used, it gets really, really scary. Because I said this before, that I don't feel like anyone is using stats in a responsible manner when it comes to the game. And what I mean by that is that they get so convoluted that it's almost impossible to do it in a way that I think is meaningful, right? With so many different topics. And I mean, you can even see that because stats don't necessarily tell you the truth. They just lead you to questions, but no one goes to the question once the stat shows them something.
Well, a lot of them can't.
Right, they can't. Sure. So that's an issue in itself. It also bothers me that like there's this idea that my abrasiveness on stream or theatrics, right? I call it spectacle.
Yeah.
It is how I conduct myself either in private or that means that something that I'm saying isn't accurate.
Yeah, it's like the typical case where like people see how you're like behaving on like a Twitch stream, and then they think that's how you are as a person. Yeah. And then not just that, they also like they view you in a bad light because like sometimes you're molding, right? Or sometimes like you're using more aggressive terms, but obviously you're doing them for a reason, and they don't understand that. If everyone was just speaking with this same calm voice all this time and never change it and just keep speaking like this all this time, and then you think you're gonna have any impact, or no, you're not. You're soon people are gonna resident sleeper, So yeah.
I mean, it definitely sucks, but it's kind of weird because, I mean, it makes conversations really hard, and we don't get conversations really in the scene. And another thing that really bothers me is that it seems like an overwhelming majority of people have this idea that 2 people can just say things and both are okay. That really bothers me. If I say something and I'm wrong, I want to just be told that I'm wrong and shown why, right? Yeah. If your explanation for showing me why I'm wrong or something is to cite a champion's pick rate or their win rate, I don't want to fucking deal with you. Because I have to lay out so much groundwork and foundation to even begin to talk to you. It's like I don't even know. I'm speaking a different language.
Yeah, it's like actually
it's so gross, right? But then we see things that historically I've gotten into, shitfest for. Remember, iconic one is a year ago, right? Amazing's tweet on fast-paced jungling, right? And it was on the precipice of farm jungling. Now, me and Malice were the 2, I guess, Western personalities that were really outspoken about power farming and that you should be power farming, right? And that tweet came out, and when I tried to ask to go over a VOD, right, to demonstrate the mistakes, I was immediately responded with that tweet that now gets memed in Twitch chat and all this other stuff, right? But he wasn't the only one that thought that way. No, you're just supposed to gank and not power farm. And
honestly, it's like he's probably doing a better job than most in a way that at least he's like
he's trying to have engagement. Yes. Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they don't do that. They're just
Oh no, I think it's. I implore people to be speaking out more publicly. although I guess I implore it more so for nefarious reasons in a way, because I think that they'll just expose themselves.
Yeah, but not just that. There's also one more.
Which then means that players get protected.
Yeah. There's also one angle which I want to touch on is there's been talks in the scene that you always like try to take credit for things, or like you never admit you're wrong or anything like this. But like, for example, in this specific instance, the example of like power farming being a thing, you were talking about this literally like so many months before it happened, which is something everyone is doing right now. Everyone. When did it start happening? So in my mind, maybe I'm wrong about this, but in my mind, I feel like it finally started happening when like Down Canyon usually started playing like that. He was like,
even in interviews, they paraphrase things that I said in those tweets from earlier on, which is
they
that
said
the laner should be good enough. Yes.
Play well, and then it shouldn't be jungler's responsibility to like
bail you out.
You out, basically. So you were talking about this months before.
Yeah.
Everyone was miming it, mocking it. A lot of the champions you were talking about. And then we are here a couple of months later, and all of a sudden the whole game is changed, and people think, why? All of a sudden it happened, nothing changed.
Well, they blame Riot, but it's not just Riot. I mean, so this is why I said that, you know, the tweet about bring back Elise, Lee Sin, all these champions and make it a ganking meta again, it shouldn't happen. If those champions come back, the laners suck.
I agree.
They shouldn't come back. They can't come back unless the game actually almost devolves. Unless
so
Riot
buffed.
makes them so
buffed
that
they
right?
just break the game.
They violate the rules, right? They violate their theme.
Which does happen to some champions.
Sometimes that happens. Yeah, and that's fine. And when that happens, you should pick those champions. Absolutely.
I agree.
So I mean, that's totally fine. But no, I mean, I mean, we'll probably have lots of conversations on.
I mean, this is like a good example. You were talking about this like way before, how like patchless games. I mean, a good example would be if we were in the same patch right now and we keep playing the game for like months and months and months and months. Do people really believe in 5 months from now, in 10 months from now, we're going to see the same champions and the same exact meta?
Even if it was 5 or 10 months, that doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, Brood War was frozen for a lot longer.
It doesn't. It might take more time. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, at some point, for sure, something's going to change while the game doesn't change.
Yeah. Patchless games are, I think, the best reference point to show a lot of stuff. So, for instance, in Melee, frames are a thing. You know what frames are?
No.
Frame inputs. It's basically you have to hit certain buttons or inputs at very specific points that are so insane, right? Timing wise. And a lot of commonly, believed things back in the day was certain matchups were unplayable because humans or people could not hit these
frames.
These frames or these tech chases or like these things consistently enough to balance or swing the matchup, right?
And let me guess, one player did it?
Of course, one player does it and then more people start doing it. Right, of course. It's always the pattern, right? Now, I've been around in esports despite my age, right? Because people have this idea that I'm like young. I've been around for 16 years. I'm going on 17 years at this level, right? At like esports, competitive pro circuit, like ingrained, just following it, talking about it, thinking about it, playing, and like all this other stuff, right? Across many different genres.
Games,
So I've seen the patterns. So when I talk to people that haven't seen the patterns, or they tell me that something's too hard in League, it's like talking to an alien.
I can give you a good example, right? F-keys, for example. A couple of years ago, memed a joke. Why should the player use them?
Nowadays, everyone uses them.
Nowadays, they're normal.
Of course. But it was objectively demonstrable that they're just superior.
Yeah, of course.
It shouldn't even be an argument.
I mean, I can tell you how I started using them, right? Like, I was listening to you, and then most noticeably Faker was like one of the first pros that started using it. And I just kept thinking about it, like, why, and are they actually better? I quickly came to a conclusion, yes, you will just be objectively faster if you use an F key.
Yeah, of course.
Than if you actually, be so fast with your mouse, which I was at that point already. Yeah. But the F keys was still faster, so why not use them? Yeah.
There's just a lot of things. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call these things original thoughts, but I do think there are a lot of original thoughts that they face a lot of turbulence whenever they're said. Or when they do end up coming to fruition or something like that, it takes so much time, or something has to go super wrong. That's why like the scrims that we're doing right now, I think are really important to me for showcasing drafting philosophy, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, you can't have, a mid-top and AD or support flex this many champions. It's not practical. And it's like, man, I don't even play the game. I don't even play this role.
Yeah.
I mean, we're flexing, across 4 different roles, and there's no problems. Like, I mean, and I understand, like, the scrim team that we're using right now, it's not the best players, nor do we expect to be able to beat, like...
We are not the best players
We're not the best players, right.
Yeah.
But some of the teams that we are going to play against are comparable to that you would find in other regions.
I agree.
So... if it's working against them and we fucking suck, there's something there, right? I mean, but this is also, it circles back to like the willingness to demonstrate. This is what it is, or getting someone to demonstrate.
Yeah. The scrims are very important for me too. So.
How are the differences between the scrims here?
Well,
with the ragtag group.
Well, it feels way different in a way. So. There's one clear goal always in mind. I feel like we're all on the same page, which makes like everything so much easier. Comes to draft, there's like no arguments when it comes to no big arguments that happen like normally in teams.
It's usually different champions that are on the same team.
It feels so good to be in the game and just not like, you don't even need to question the other players.
Yep.
Anything they do, everything you do, you can immediately like trust or relate to. Just the whole game, you don't even have to communicate. Basically, you already know what the other person's thinking. In a way, we're communicating maybe basic things or things that like need to be like in jargon. You can like communicate, right? Where's the jargon down right now at this specific second or something? Smite it, blah blah. But on that, we don't need to. I mean, it feels good to go to a champ select and be able to demonstrate a different way of playing the game, both in game, I guess, wise and out of the game.
Well, this is the funny thing, I think, also about the idea about communication, right?
Yeah.
Is none of us have played together. We've now played 21 games.
We played, the first game we played together was the first scrim we played on stream.
And
not just that. We haven't played together at all. You haven't played support. Like,
the Koreans are speaking in English. Like, everyone's using super basic stuff.
Yeah,
like
basic English.
Multicultural, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm American, you're European, we have 3 Koreans. Like... But there's no like the idea of communication that people have isn't in the comms. The idea that people have. It's because the game's a language.
Yeah,
right. The game's a language.
Yeah.
Yes. So also, I find that funny.
You know what's also funny? These scrims show how insane the word synergy is and how insane it was used.
That was
in general, like over
vibe.
Years.
Yeah.
What the hell is synergy, by the way? Like, what? I can play one game.
So, I think I had this conversation with you. My idea of synergy is, so for instance, me and Shrimp used to play Maokai and Cho, right?
Yeah.
As like a meme mid-jungle duo, right?
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of with synergy is Shrimp going to cue him towards me or away from me so I can throw the rupture to time it? That's literally it, right?
Yeah.
Now, when we didn't play it for a while, we would miss the rupture or the Q direction, right? When we were playing with each other frequently enough, we knew, like, sort of what each other were. That's the only thing I can think of, but it's so quick to get on that page.
It's just crazy that I can play one game of scrims with players I've never played it with my life, basically, or besides occasional maybe solo games or something. And I can be so on the same page about how to play the game, or like how the game should be played, or how we want to play the game.
Yeah.
It's a different world, really. Yeah.
I mean, the way the conversations go too.
And we do with no reviews, essentially. We don't even.
We're not even reviewing.
We're self-reviewing.
Terrible.
Them.
Like, I'm playing support. You know what I mean?
We're reviewing them in our heads, basically.
Yeah. There's that. I mean, the review should be there. Like, everyone can lane better.
Yeah.
Right. Everyone can lane better.
We can improve on so many things.
But I mean, this will be fun content over the course of the summer. And then obviously, like when Worlds and boot camp team get here and all this other stuff, it'll definitely be good. But
Do you
Yeah,
wanna
I mean-
do you wanna do the last thing, the questions maybe?
Yeah, we can fish for
'Cause
topic
we're-
from Twitch chat. I think this episode sort of went. I mean, we touched on a lot of different things, right? The main thing is I wanted to really start getting the questions going of just how much conjecture is in the scene, and just talking about the general consensus on analysis and coaching, right? Because it should never just be mostly fortified by results. It shouldn't. That is so gross. It's really, really gross. But then also, I think most questions and other stuff, and we're not specifically saying anything about things in specific. We're just saying this is generally how it is and how it operates, and it shouldn't be this way. And now I'm trying to highlight through questions. I'm trying to get people to ask themselves or make themselves aware, wait a minute, actually, yeah, it doesn't work that way. Or like, wait, why does it work that? Why is this the case, right? I'm trying to just like knock people out of a trance, because that's what it feels like. Everyone's in a trance.
Yeah.
And no one wants to question anything. And then we get called a cult. Mass is on Mondays. Don't forget. don't forget on that one. Don't forget. No, I think this was pretty good for the first episode.
Yeah.
We'll be doing this weekly. Every time there's going to be like a main entree. I don't know if the location is set in stone yet. Right now we're at Gen G.
Yeah. Shout out to Gen G.
Yeah, shout out to Gen G. I don't know if the location is set in stone yet, but we'll be doing this weekly, and then it'll run a course, right? General, global follow-ups. If there's community hot topics, we'll dive into it, right? We'll definitely dive into community hot topics. And then there will be like a main entree with something at the end, dessert, which is the Twitch chat dessert.
Twitch chat dessert.
Twitch chat dessert.
Maybe that's what we call it. Next time we'll just call it Twitch dessert.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So yeah, we will figure out a static date for this. We'll set a date. And then it'll always be streamed on Twitch. I'll upload it to YouTube. We'll look into like other things that we can do with it, and then yeah, I mean there's pretty much that. And this is one of the things that is mostly it's mostly entirely possible because you came out here. The support on Patreon is also really, really big for setting everything up with like stuff that me and you are going to be doing. Because in addition to the talk show that we're doing right now, the VOD reviews start this week. And they really do this. Look, we needed the mics and the mix, everything. We have it, okay? We don't have excuses.
Yeah.
So they will start this week. The private patron VOD reviews, and then some VOD reviews will go up on YouTube and be public too. On like what we're looking at in a pro view and like what to take away from a pro view, and yeah. So
yeah. And don't forget, people, LCS resuming tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll be live in 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even before.
Well, we'll be live actually in 23 hours. We'll be live from T1 tomorrow. So yeah, Nemesis and I will be together like the MSI live viewings, but we'll be live for the LCS co-stream tomorrow to kick off. I think it's TSM versus TL to kick it off.
Yeah.
So
nice,
yeah, nice, good stuff. But I think that is it. Twitch chat. Let us know.
And YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube as well. Yes,
YouTube
sir.
frogs.
What? What?
That's what you call them. YouTube frogs.
Frogs?
Yeah, that's the term.
Okay.
Like Twitch chat and
right.
YouTube frogs.
Let us know on Twitter or whatever medium for feedback, YouTube comments as well, about like the length, the structure, and everything else. And neither of us do hosting in talk shows, so this is sort of just going to be like
free flow.
Yeah, it's gonna be free flowing. So that's pretty much it. But I think that's it. So see you guys later.
Thank you all for watching.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, and that is it for the first episode of League Nightmares. If you guys enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe to this channel. But then in addition to that, there's also going to be a clips channel, which you can check out, which will have clips from the League Nightmares. It's going to air every single week. And if you also just want audio only, you can make sure to check it out on Spotify and iTunes. The link is going to be in the description below. And we will see you next week.